Hey, Cowboy Logic Nation, Kelly Meggs from the DC Gitmo. Thanks so much for all your support out there. We appreciate everything you're doing.
All right, welcome back to Cowboy Logic, everybody. We're going to go into some all things J6. And if you haven't noticed, today I'm wearing a J6 sweatshirt. It was a little chilly here at the farm, and you can pick these up at cowboylogic.us. Click on the store button in the menu.
I was about to say that.
And you were going to say that. Okay. It was actually scripted for Donna to say, and I walked all over. I don't use scripts.
Yeah.
All right. Our next guest is making his debut appearance here on Cowboy Logic. He is newly freed, although he's under probation right now. But he just got out of prison, and prior to that, the D.C. Gulag. And we're going to bring on one Tim Hale to join us on Cowboy Logic. And welcome, Tim, first of all, to Cowboy Logic. We appreciate you.
Dressed for the occasion.
That's right.
I'm honored.
That's right. I'm feeling a little underdressed here, but I think that's going to be okay. Having said that.
I'm a stud.
That's right, you are. What can you say? I want to put something to rest once. And that is that dating back 2.5 years ago, we started hearing that this gentleman, Tim Hale, was a racist, a neo-Nazi, a Hitler supporter, and all of that jazz. And if you do any type of a Google search about this man, you're going to see that. And I'm here to tell you that we have vetted Tim, and we have spoken to probably a dozen beloved J6ers that we trust and respect. And every one of those J6ers has said that is a lie. That this man is a stand-up human being, and that he's the last thing from being a neo-Nazi, a white supremacist, or a racist. And so I want to put that on your behalf, Tim. I want to put that to rest now, because that was, you were wrongly accused of that, and we have verified that with people that have been on this show countless times that we trust and respect. So
yeah, but that's what we're finding. The opposition always lies because it's what they are doing themselves in many cases. And that could also be the case in this.
And a lot of that stemmed from that photo of you in costume. I think it was for what, Halloween?
So this is how messed up the prosecution actually is. And granted, I'm not the only one this has been done to. You know, the Oath Keepers got, you know how they got misrepresented there.
Yep.
So basically, the famous Hitler mustache picture was actually from a year before January 6th. It was part of a series of satirical videos I used to make when I was making fun of Governor Phil Murphy when he was locking the state down, justifying it with emergency powers. I was satirically making fun of Phil Murphy and trying to say that he was Hitler. Is it low-hanging fruit? Yeah, but that's the kind of stuff I did. I was a soldier in the Army for 12 years. I was working as a naval contractor too. But on the down low, I was also a comedian. I was a satirist, and I'd actually been producing satire since I was like 14 years old. And anybody who knows me personally knows that. This is why, not for nothing, but if someone who had been in government service that long, for over a decade, with a secret security clearance, had really been that messed up, they'd have known that, and also I wouldn't be in the positions that I was in. What had actually happened was, of course, they wanted to again. This is not just the insurrection narrative. This is also the Trump supporters are racist narrative. Yeah. So what the feds did was it was a foregone conclusion, actually. So before they even had the mustache picture, they actually were trying to say, they were actually trying to say that I was a Nazi sympathizer because I owned a copy of Mein Kampf. But what they didn't tell people then also was that I was a history major, and it was in my World War II collection because I had 1,000 books, but they chose one book to make me out to be this thing. And it just goes on and on and on. It was a foregone conclusion. They had to frame it that way. But no, I mean, it's basically what it is. And I could go into all the nuances for every little thing they've accused me of, but it's the same thing as with everybody. It's always framed within their moral framework. And nobody ever asked me my side of the story. And even the public defenders, you know how good they were with January 6th defendants. They didn't even try to argue this stuff. My first public defender, instead of listening to the arguments I was making that we could prove with actual evidence, he actually he conceded that he was actually friends with my prosecutor, and they weren't going to do me any favors. I mean, that's
you've
just
got
how
100%, really 100% conviction rate. I mean, it's getting to the point where it's ridiculous. I like the Fedsurrection hat, by the way. That's pretty cool. Speaking of which, Murphy, well, you can keep it off if you want. Murphy, of course,
it's a bigly hat.
It's
Tim.
a bigly hat.
Bigly hat.
Yes. But my home state of New Jersey, which is where you are, and by the way, you're at Louis of Monmouth. Louisof, Monmouth, as in Monmouth County, and you're very active on social media. Your Twitter /X, whatever the hell you want to call it, is pretty eye-opening, and that's kind of what called our attention to you to begin with. Talk about Jan 6th, though. Why did you go there on January 6th?
Sure. Well, it's interesting because, again, with all the narratives about Trump supporters being these violent partisans or whatever, I don't even consider myself a Republican partisan. I was just a Trump supporter. I was a union guy, but I was also America First. So, and again, I was as a history major, so I really value history. So I went down there on January 6th because it was going to be, in my eyes, it was going to be one of two things. Either it unfortunately would have been President Trump's last speech as president, or it was going to be the beginning of his next term as president. So it was going to be a historic day regardless. It did become historic, but not in the way that I initially anticipated. So essentially, I just went down there to hear his speech. I didn't know there was even going to be a protest at the Capitol. And I certainly didn't know there was going to be a riot or a fake insurrection, quote unquote. If you, and unfortunately, I think this is why a lot of us were kept without bond. They seized my phone, they seized a lot of evidence, and it was only after I got out of prison that I could finally start releasing the videos that I had at the Ellipse. And there's people saying there's some kind of a march going on because people didn't even know that there was going to be something going on at the Capitol. And then you can just gradually watch as people make their way to the Capitol area. And by the time I get there, this is a half hour after Ray Epps and his people knocked barriers over. So the vast majority of people had no idea there was even a perimeter set up, which sounds like entrapment, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And so we go there, and for the majority of the videos I have, you can see people are chanting USA, they're singing God Bless America. You have no idea that there are agitators and cops going at it at the front of the lines. So for the majority of it, when you're there, when you first arrive, it's an ocean of people. There are thousands of people that pour in, and it just seems like it's a First Amendment demonstration. Which,
I remember seeing cops waving people in initially when I was watching it live, and then all of a sudden you don't see those videos anymore. The double standard is quite insane, and they can lie with impunity because they know they have a D.C. court and judges that think they were victims. It's just impossible to get any kind of a fair trial. Did you have a question?
That leads me to a question before we go to break, Tim. What were you charged with? How much time did you do? What was your sentencing? And I know that you were at least in D.C. You probably were in other jails at that in pre-trial. But give us you got about a minute and a half. Give us a little bit about what you were hit with and your time served.
So this is, I think, a reflection of the weaponization. I was initially just charged with stupid misdemeanors like trespassing or improper entry or whatever. But it was after the 20th, after the inauguration of Biden, that's when I got indicted. And I got indicted with the ridiculous obstruction charge, 18 U.S.C. 1512. I went to trial. I was moved to the D.C. jail. I was initially denied bond, or I initially got granted bond by a magistrate. The district judge overruled it. I got brought to D.C., and I had to sit in the D.C. gulag for 16 months, a year and a half, before I got to go to trial. I was in D.C. for about 2 years total before I got moved to BOP, the Bureau of Prisons, and I spent about a year in the prison on Fort Dix. So in total, I spent about 3 years incarcerated, and it was primarily because of the obstruction charge, though there are other aspects to why I got that kind of a sentence. That was not supposed to be my guidelines, but the government had plans for me regardless.
Seems like they got more brazen, because once Biden was in, then they knew they had carte blanche. All right, so talk to us a little bit about the 1512, and what are your thoughts on that as far, well, we've got less than a minute to break.
The 1512 charge, from my analysis, was planned ahead of time, not just for January 6 defendants, but also for President Trump. We'll get into this, but there were defendants in the jail who confessed that they were at the Capitol to get out of trouble for drug conspiracies from 2020. And those are the first defendants to have 18 USC 1512 upheld in federal court, I believe by Judge Friedrich, or Dietrich. I believe it's Friedrich. But so that makes this, it's more than a coincidence. This was all planned ahead of time, not just to sabotage Trump in 2020, but later on for 2024. So the charge is completely weaponized. And as you just alluded to, they've even called it shock and awe. Yeah. They were trying to send a message, and they did.
All right, when we get back from the break, we're going to dig into this a little bit, ladies and gentlemen. We've got J6er Tim Hale in here with us. We have now debunked on a national television show that this man is, in fact, not a racist or a white supremacist. You're watching Cowboy Logic. We'll be right back.
Four corrupt, politically motivated prosecutors. One target, Donald Trump. They say they're upholding the law, but a close examination reveals politics of the very worst kind meant to influence the 2024 election. Investigations unprecedented in American history, part of a broader attempt to silence and penalize a president who challenged the status quo.
You have 4 or 5 different prosecutions in different form on different highly aggressive theories and applications of the law. On the eve of an election of the President of the United States, can there be any doubt that there's a sentiment of this is get Trump? Get Trump.
These prosecutions against President Trump, both the criminal prosecution along with the civil fraud prosecution, is blatant election interference. It's Democrat lawfare to take out President Trump. They fear that they can't beat Trump on November 5th, 2024, and so they just want to throw him in prison for the rest of his life.
Revealing the depth of 4 politically motivated prosecutions. Chasing Trump, political prosecutions, justice gone wrong.
When I started MyPillow, it was just a problem solution, one product company. Well, since then, with the help of my dedicated employees, we now have hundreds of products, some you might not even know about. To get the word out, we're having a $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use MyPillows, $25. MyPillow sandals, $25. And for the first time ever, our 6-pack towel sets, you guessed it, just $25. Our brand new 4-pack dish towels, $25. And I've never done this before. Premium MyPillows with all new Giza fabric, any size, any loft level, even king size for only $25. And there's so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code for our $25 extravaganza. Order $75 and over. Your entire order ships absolutely free.
What truly matters is not which party controls our government, but whether our government is controlled by the people. For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government while the people have borne the cost. The establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country. That all changes starting right here and right now.
right, everybody, it starts with one. And then you need to be that second one to stand up.
And then it's catching.
And that's when the dance starts, is when the second person stands up and starts dancing to the music.
We need a tsunami going into November, that's for
right.
sure.
All right, let's bring Tim back in here. Ladies and gentlemen, we got Tim Hale, J6er, joining us for the first time. And Tim, we're grateful that you're here with us. You've got a lot of information. We're going to be bringing you back for follow-ups on everything that we're talking about today. But for right now, I want to get into a little bit about a comment that you made before we went to break, and that is certain individuals that were in that D.C. jail with you guys didn't kind of fit the mold for a MAGA, Trump-supporting individual that was there on January 6th. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to let you guys know right now that we are not going to name names. We are going to talk about situations. And whether there's a point down the road where we start naming names or not, that's yet to be decided on our end. But Tim, pick back up where you left off there. You know, you mentioned the fact that there were individuals that may have been charged with some federal crimes prior to January 6th. And you guys, a handful of you guys, believe that they were in there with you.
Sure. And well, first again, let me just say thank you for having me on. So yeah, and honestly, it was more than a handful of us that thought this. After I'd actually left, a bunch of the guys finally got fed up with it, and they actually signed an 11-page statement outing them. So we're not going to go through the names, but a lot of the names are in that statement. So essentially, yeah, one of the most glaring things, as I alluded to, was the 1512 charge first being upheld for federal informants. These two co-defendants were there in costumes, they were there with recording equipment, and they were basically there to push the insurrection narrative. I mean, it's ironic because, and this isn't to say that there's no context for some of the violence on the outside of the building, but the inside of the building was suspiciously not violent. Well, I shouldn't say suspiciously. It was actually very calm inside the Capitol building. But one of the few people who actually were violent inside the Capitol building were these same defendants, and they were the first defendants who had the 1512 charge upheld in federal court. And again, this is the charge being used not just against J6ers, but against President Trump. So hopefully the Supreme Court tosses this charge out because it's bogus, but that's a huge red flag. These defendants supposedly were caught in drug conspiracies in 2020. So right before January 6th, they got in trouble and they went to the Capitol to get out of it. This is from their own lips, and I heard this. Now, you had others with similar stories. People who had no history of being Trump supporters, but who did show up to the Capitol. In particular, there's a well-known individual, I'm not going to name him, of course, but he was known to get caught with drugs and not get in trouble. He was not a Trump supporter. In fact, he's an anarchist. And he didn't vote he didn't vote. So why was he even at the Capitol? Now, there are plenty of stories like this. There were Antifa members as well. Mm-hmm. There were other, I mean, there was someone there who was snuck in, who was actually by the window where Ashley Babbitt got shot. He broke the window where she got shot, and he confessed to being Antifa. So there was another individual. I mean, there's a long list. There's another individual who told the FBI he was actually a communist and he was trying to get Trump supporters killed. And
we exposed him. We used his own court documents. Nothing was speculation.
But there are
different kinds of informants too.
Yeah,
I apologize. I just wanted to say there is nuance here, so there's no easy answer, and this is why it's so messy to get into this. There are confidential human sources, or CHSs. Sometimes they're called criminal informants, CIs. Basically, these are people who provide information in exchange for something else, usually leniency for a crime they committed. You have jailhouse informants or jailhouse snitches. These are people who are in jails and maybe they don't have a formal agreement, but they pass information along hoping to get leniency. You also have what's called a Perkins informant. And I believe the group I was initially in with the marshals with interacted with at least one of these, possibly two of these, one on Con Air and then one in Grady County. A Perkins informant is someone that the feds just plant in a jail cell with you to listen to what you say and then pass the information along. And then you have what's called proffer agreements. Several defendants inside the jail agreed to what's called a proffer agreement, where you have a private meeting with the feds and you give them information. It's not necessarily even a guarantee that they're going to go easy on you. If you actually read the contracts, it's not a guarantee of anything. But the theory is that they'll go a little easier on you if you provide them information. And the last thing I'll say is that you cannot be 100% about anyone, because under federal law, you can actually get a reduction in your sentence if you provide them information after you've been sentenced for up to a year. It's called Federal Rule 35B. I think it's subsection 2. And you have up to a year after you've been sentenced. Even if you're already in prison, you can still provide the feds information about other defendants or useful information, and the judge can reduce your sentence. So the federal system is designed largely to benefit itself, but also to benefit, of course, people who rat on others and anybody who helps keep their conviction rate high. So it's
and I think if you really look at the length of sentences, you can see, really the disparity there, and it kind of fits. Ironically, you said many people just were peaceful and walking through. You have Matthew Perna's button on right there. He was one of them. I mean, just walking through the Capitol, looking around, because a lot of people don't realize most people were there sightseeing. Many people had never been to the Capitol before, but we've had other J6ers on with us. Jeremy Brown, for instance, who said he knows of people being approached. Now, he was approached prior to January 6th and or prior to Election Day, actually. And he knew of a lot of that possibly happening as early as April of that year. So this definitely was a plan.
Against the Oath Keepers.
Against the Oath Keepers and other organizations. And then you have an ABC crew there. A film crew there, and Nancy Pelosi's daughter. The Fedsurrection is so obvious, and the Brady violations are so obvious. Go ahead.
You mentioned the Oath Keepers. I mean, here's another example. One of the guys I've mentioned before, he tried to get Jessica Watkins and the Oath Keepers to confess to being seditionists. Well, they were being charged with seditious conspiracy. It's like, why would he? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The same individual tried to get people to sign documents advocating the violent overthrow of the U.S. government. I mean, to use the term "glow in the dark" would be an understatement. I mean, the place was crawling with people trying to sabotage our cases. There was a guy in there pretending to be a colonel who tried to get people. He tried to incite people into saying things about killing politicians. There was another guy in there who actually wrote a 40-page report on another inmate, and he put it in his face, bragging that he was snitching on the guy.
I just don't see how you can have an insurrection with no guns. I mean, and a bunch of blue hair grannies, and I mean it's.
All right,
it's
look,
so weird when you look back on it.
We've got less than a minute, Tim. I'd like to allow you to take a little time and tell people how they can follow the work you're doing right now, how they can help J6ers. You can point them in whatever direction you need to, but I'll give you about 30 seconds to do all of that.
Sure, thank you. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tim Hale, criminally funny J6er, or at Lewis of Monmouth. Mm-hmm. I post a lot of the stories that nobody's heard. Like I said, I used to be a union rep. I was an administrator in the Army. Paperwork and all that stuff is something I've done my whole life. So I have a pretty long paper trail, and I have 3 years of receipts. And I do name the rats that were in there to try to sabotage our
we have you back. We got to have you and Sean Farish on at the same time, because you
give us a quick one.
Pretty damn good, Donald Trump.
Give us a quick one, man. 10 seconds.
John Kasich, he shoves a pancake in his mouth. My son Barron, he goes, "Look, Daddy." I say, "Don't look. Little ones."
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Cowboy Logic. Thank you, Tim. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, Don Noon with Cowboy Logic. This commercial is about Cowboy Logic beef jerky, but we're going to do it a little different this time. We're going to make you really want it. So I've got some out to shoot. We have 4 different flavors, cowboylogicbeefjerky.com. I'm going to do it a little different. For the next 45 seconds, I'm just going to sit here and eat some beef jerky. Good. CowboyLogicBeefJerky.com. Promo code 1776 gets you 10% off.